Have you ever just stopped and wondered how you're even able to wonder? How can all this physical stuff, neurons, synapses, all these chemicals, somehow turn its gaze inward and know itself? This isn't just some late-night philosophical riddle. It's one of the deepest computational problems out there. And today, we're going to dive into a really fascinating answer, one that might totally change how you think about what a self even is. Okay, so think about it like this. You've got a thermostat, right? It's a brilliant little gadget. It senses the room temperature and acts to keep things stable and comfy. But here's the thing, it has no idea it's a thermostat. Now your brain, it regulates, well, pretty much everything about you. Your breathing, what you want for dinner, your biggest dreams. But the crucial difference is, it knows it's doing it. It literally includes a picture of itself in its own model of the world. So how on earth does it pull that off?
And that is the central question for us today. How can any system, whether it's a brain or a future AI, actually build a model of itself inside of itself? This isn't like, just installing a new app. It's a really deep, fundamental architectural challenge. And the answer, well, it hinges on this one idea that can feel kind of like a paradox at first.
And that property is self-reference. That's the whole key. A system is self-referential if its internal map of the world also has a little "you are here" sticker on it. It has bits and pieces that represent its own states and processes. It's a model that, get this, includes the modeler. But here's the catch. Logicians figured out a long time ago that when you let a system talk about itself, things can get weird. You run into paradoxes.
Yet this points to a really fundamental limit. There was this brilliant logician, Kurt Gödel, who proved that any formal system that's complex enough can't fully describe itself perfectly and consistently. It's just impossible. So that means the brain's self-model has to be, by definition, incomplete. But here's the cool part. That's not a bug, it's a feature. That's what keeps our minds so dynamic and always updating. And the result of this messy but totally functional self-reference, is something you and I experience literally every moment. And what we call that experience is metacognition. It's a fancy word for something super simple. Thinking about your own thinking. You know that feeling when you just know something? Or when you're talking and you suddenly catch yourself about to say the wrong thing? Or when you're trying to remember something and you're just not sure? That's metacognition. It's what this self-referencing system actually produces. And we are doing this all the time. Like, you're working on something and you think, okay, this feels easy, I got this. That's fluency. Or you're in the middle of a sentence and you just pause, wait, that doesn't sound right. That's error monitoring. And of course, there's just straight up confidence. How sure am I that I locked the door? In all of these cases, it's your brain checking in on itself in real time.
Okay, so how does the brain actually build this? The obvious thought is, well, just create a little self node in the network, right? But nope, it's not that simple. That actually causes a ton of other problems, and it just doesn't explain how dynamic our self-awareness is. The real answer is, well, it's way more clever and way more integrated. The real solution is building a graph, a network that's structured in a way that it can represent its own states and processes. Think about that. The graph isn't just modeling the world out there, it's modeling itself as it models the world. And the way it does this self-modeling is through something called metavariables. So these aren't variables about, the color of your car or the weather outside. These are variables about the thinking process itself. They track things like, how uncertain am I right now? Or how much do I trust this belief? Or have I been making a lot of mistakes lately? So what you end up with is a graph that literally has knowledge about itself. It's wild. It can have beliefs about its own beliefs. It can say, I believe X, and I'm 80% confident in that belief. It can track its own track record, its recent error patterns. It can even know what mode it's in. Like, okay, I'm in deep focus mode now, versus I'm just kind of daydreaming. And all of this whole setup, leads to a consequence that is genuinely mind-bending. And this quote here from Douglas Hofstadter just nails it. He says, the I that introspects is itself a construct of the introspective process. Think about what that means. That little I inside your head that you feel is watching your thoughts, it's not some separate pilot in the cockpit. That I is the process of watching. It's the system looking at itself. This is the core of what he famously called a strange loop. So what is a strange loop? It's basically a tangled-up hierarchy. You know that famous M.C. Escher drawing of the two hands, and each one is drawing the other? That's a strange loop. You can't tell which one is on top, which one is the cause. In our brains, the higher-level thoughts are modeling the lower-level stuff, but those lower levels have these metavariables that are tracking what the higher levels are doing. The whole thing just curves back on itself. Just
take a second with that. The model contains the modeler. The map of the world inside your head contains a little map of the map maker. It's a system that is folded back onto itself, looked at itself, and included itself in the picture.
And this right here is why when you try to look inside your own head, you never find the real you sitting at a control panel. There's no little person pulling the levers. What do you find? You just find more thoughts. Thoughts about other thoughts. The observer and the thing being observed, they're not separate. They're two sides of the exact same coin, this recursive looping process. And this idea completely changes what we think the self is.
So the common sense view, the one we all kind of grow up with, is that the self is a thing. It's a stable object, an entity, that lives in your head and has your thoughts. But this whole computational view we've been walking through, it suggests that's not right. That feeling of a solid self, it's a powerful illusion, created by this strange loop architecture.
So here's the big takeaway. The self isn't a noun, it's a verb, it's a process. It's this dynamic, self-sustaining pattern of the brain's network constantly modeling itself, a pattern that keeps itself going through time. It's an act, not an object.
And this idea gets us so close to why consciousness even feels the way it does. That subjective, what it's like to be me feeling. Maybe that feeling, the feeling of being a self, is simply the feeling of this strange loop in motion. It's the constant recursive hum of a system that's always looking at itself. And look, this isn't just some abstract philosophical trip. This self-modeling architecture is what gives us our superpowers, basically. It's how you can catch yourself making a mistake before you act on it. It's how you realize you're stuck on a problem and need to try a different approach. It's how you decide to dedicate more brain power to a hard task. And maybe most importantly, it's how you know what you know and what you don't know.
So there it is. Through this incredible strange loop of self-reference, the graph knows itself. It's the architecture that lets a bunch of physical matter become self-aware, which is just incredible. But this leads to one last, really interesting question. Okay, so the graph knows itself, great, but is knowledge without some kind of regulation just chaos? I mean, what happens when different parts of this self-model disagree? When your desire for that piece of cake right now conflicts with your long-term goal to be healthy? Knowledge alone isn't enough, right? You need governance, some kind of regulation, or the whole system would just be a mess. There has to be another layer.
And that's where we find ourselves on the edge of the next big idea. Enter the holarchy. This idea of nested, almost independent levels of governance that manage this whole self-referential dance without a single boss in charge. But that's a story for another time.